Hey family, welcome to Sergeant Dorsey Speaks live at, well, it's not quite 5, but I am live. Thanks for joining. Welcome. Come on in, gather around, have a seat. I apologize for being a little bit tardy today, but for those of you who know me, you know I'm a foodie. And so today I had the pleasure of having a great lunch and conversation with a dear friend. And so thank you, dear friend, for joining me today. And then when everything was said and done, I mean, we were yammering it up. And the next thing I knew, I was like, yikes, I got to get home. LA traffic. So here we are. Thank you for joining me. And as you come in, share this on your timeline with your friends. I'm going to do the same thing, share this on my timeline. And we'll get started in just a minute. But listen, I had alluded to this a little bit earlier this morning. I should still be in the air on my way to Paris. And when I tell you I dodged a bullet, ooh wee, God takes care of babies and fools, right? I was due to land tomorrow morning about, well, 9:30 in Paris, which would be, I think, 8 or 9 hours earlier than here. So in the early morning hours here, I was due to land. And yeah, I was all prepared because I'm compulsive, and I was all prepared to just say, you know what, I'm gonna go, be damned. This protest transportation may be a little bit slow and all of that. I'll just work it out. And then, like I said earlier, it wasn't until I saw air traffic controllers were going to be protesting, as well as they were telling restaurants and shops and lounges and stores, you guys need to close up because we can't guarantee that you're going to be in a good place. And so I thought, well, shoot, what's the point in being in Paris if I'm stuck in a hotel, right? Thankfully, I was able to contact the airline, and they said no problem because of this this travel alert. My ticket will be good for use next year whenever I decide to do that. And so I just decided, okay, so let me just sit still, and then, let me revisit what it is I want to do in terms of travel next year. So 2020 is going to be lit because I got a lot of making up to do, and I've got cabin fever. And but I'm looking at the news reports, and I mean to tell you, they are cutting up over there in Paris right now. And so for anybody who, you know, didn't know and got caught up, ooh wee, I hope everything will be good. And I hope it's just, a major inconvenience and no loss of life, because police were saying at some point they're not even going to respond. And that's why they were telling shop owners to close up. So hope everybody is safe and good. Hey Jay, you coming with me? Okay, yeah, I was gonna say, who got a passport? We need to talk for next year because I'm already looking at my calendar. It's not going to be Christmas, right? But I'm looking at my calendar, and I'm looking at it twice, trying to figure out, okay, what part of the world can I go to and not have to worry about stuff? I had to forego a trip to Singapore because my connection was going to put me through Hong Kong, and they're cutting up over there. So I can't, well, I guess I could have if I was on a different airline, but I have one airline that I like to use. And so I want to keep my status. So I'm kind of stuck with them and wherever they want to send me. And they were going to send me through Hong Kong to get to Singapore. So that was a no-go. So I'll revisit all of this. Okay, Jay, that's what's up. Let's make it happen, Captain. I'll revisit this and think about it. I've already got a girls' trip planned next year. Why am I telling you guys this? Do you care? I've got a girls' trip planned next year with some female cousins. We're going to go to Greece, Santorini, and do this amazing photo shoot with flying dresses. I don't know if any of you guys have seen some of the videos, but anyway, it looks like it's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm excited about that. So I'm here. You're stuck with me. And to be quite honest with you, I'm kind of glad that I'm here because there's so much going on, and I wanted to talk to you, and I didn't get a chance to talk to you last week because of the holiday. So I am ready to go. I want to gossip. I want to talk a little mess. There's a lot going on that we need to know about. You guys need to know about. And so I'll be sharing some things that were said by the Attorney General, William Barr, that are concerning to me. as well as, what you need to know, and possibly what you can do about this veiled threat. If you haven't heard, we'll talk about that today as well. So welcome, welcome, and let's get started. For those of you who are new first timers, welcome to Sergeant Dorsey Speaks Live. I do this every Thursday, generally at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. on the East Coast. And to my subbies, what's up, family? I appreciate you guys, and I like the fact that some of you have missed me as well, and we're looking forward to tonight's upload that I'll put on YouTube later. So I have a YouTube channel. For those of you on Facebook who don't know, Sergeant Dorsey Speaks on my YouTube channel. And also I have a podcast that drops every Tuesday, Sergeant Dorsey Speaks, on the podcast platform of your choice. So if you haven't had a chance to subscribe, do, because on Tuesday, I think it was pretty good. I talked about some of the stuff that I'm going to cover today, but you would want to not miss Sergeant Dorsey Speaks podcast, because there'll be things that I say there that I don't say here. So for the newcomers, who I am, I'm a retired 20-year veteran sergeant of the Los Angeles Police Department. Spent all 20 years in patrol, so I know a thing or two about a thing or two. I worked every bureau within the city of Los Angeles, which is divided into 4 quads: West Bureau, South Bureau, Central Bureau, and Valley Bureau. And having worked all 4 bureaus, I know that LAPD is not unique. Sure, most police departments, especially that are large, are like this. You kind of have 2 departments within one, right? One in the hood, officers conduct themselves one way. And then, of course, when those same officers wind up over in the more affluent areas, they tend to act like they have some sense. And so I have seen it firsthand. I've seen how officers talk to folks, deal with folks south of the Santa Monica Freeway. And then I see what is not tolerated north of the Santa Monica Freeway. And so those of you who live here in LA understand, like I do, that if on 1 month an officer is assigned to 77th and they're all uber aggressive and short-tempered, why is it that when they get over to West LA and Pacific Division, they get all different and just want to cuddle with you? It's because the people over there are not having any of that. And because the people over there tend to complain and write letters and call the captain stuff that we don't do south of the Santa Monica Freeway, not with any frequency. And so part of what I want to share with you when I speak to you week to week is what you need to know, give you the verbiage, if you will, should you find yourself on the back end of an officer who's overzealous, drunk with power, and you don't quite know the proper procedure or protocol to file a complaint. I suggest everyone who files a complaint do so in writing, not over the phone, because when you call the front desk, you may get the junior officer, who couldn't get out in the field that night, and who knows what happens with your complaint. So you should always write a letter of complaint and create a paper trail and write that letter to the person who is the immediate supervisor of the officer, the captain, contact internal affairs and send it to the commanding officer there as well, police chief, the mayor, and if you have an independent civilian review board, you want to send it to all of them. And if you happen to have an inspector general who oversees police officer activity, you want to send a copy of that letter to the inspector general as well. So my best advice is lottie-dottie and everybody, because listen, one person can kind of, maybe misplace it and put it somewhere that, oh, I didn't even know that that letter came in last week. But when you send it to more than one person, and when you CC everybody on that letter, when each of them get it, they understand that 6 or 7 other people got it. And then they start making phone calls. Hey, I got a letter with this complaint. Did you get this letter? And what are we going to do about it? So like anything else, the greasy wheel gets the oil. Now, let's get started. I want to say thank you to some folks who I haven't had a chance to thank. And so you may have been around for a couple of weeks, but I'm just now getting to you. Some of my new subbies, Rick Rogers, Leroy Ashley. I really appreciate you, Leroy, in the convo we've been having. Chris Kiley and Pamela Morgan, DeAndre Miles, new subbies. Welcome. Thank you. Hashtag tell a friend. And then I have some new Facebook followers and folks who've been liking my pages on Facebook, Sergeant Dorsey Speaks, and Cheryl Dorsey, retired LAPD Sergeant on Facebook. Both of those are my public fan pages. So to Angela Vassar, James Hall, Rosalind McLeod, Rodney Burgess, Marcus Eccles, Dwayne L., Jacqueline Sanders, Dwayne Johnson, and Evelyn Armando. Welcome. Thank you for finding me, and thank you for checking in. Thank you for being interested in what it is that I have to say. Also, the prior week's podcast, for those of you who might have missed it, I talked about thousands, and that's a shame that there are that many, but thousands of Black men who have been falsely charged, falsely arrested in Georgia and Alabama. So check out Sergeant Dorsey Speaks podcast, because there's some information that you need to know in the event that you may have family who could have conceivably been caught up in some foolishness over in those states. District attorneys are throwing out cases like animals on Noah's Ark. And so you need to know the names, and I try to give them to you when I have them, but in some instances, the names are so many that you really need to just take your time, do your due diligence, and know who these officers are. And if you have any interactions, any contact, any summons, any police arrest reports, traffic tickets, you about to get a get out of jail free card if these officers' names are on any of your documentation. So it's really important to pay attention. Hey, Mitchell. Hey, Carla. Welcome. Thank you for joining me. So check out Sergeant Dorsey Speaks podcast, the one that dropped a couple of days ago, and then my podcast from last week, because again, I didn't get to talk to you on Thanksgiving. Hope everybody had a good holiday. There was something that I wanted to share with you that came across, and I talked a little bit about this before, Uber and Lyft, and these transportation services. You really need to be mindful. You really need to be careful. The last time we talked about this, Ubers and Lyfts and stuff like that, I was talking in connection with a young lady who was missing, the daughter of a mixed martial arts fighter. I think tragically they found her remains about a week or so ago. And so now she wasn't in a Uber or a Lyft. She had just gone to get gas very late or either very early in the morning. And she encountered someone, I believe there are 2 or 3 people that are in custody. But nonetheless, when you get in these Ubers, and listen, I understand, sometimes, a lot of times, the reason people get Uber is because maybe you've been out partying, you've been drinking, a little impaired. And isn't that the best time for someone to try to take advantage, particularly ladies, take advantage of you? You really, really need to be careful. You need to be mindful. And even if you're going to be jumping in an Uber, you almost need to have a designated rider, a designated passenger with you to make sure that you don't become a victim, because it's being reported right now for the first time. Uber is actually giving you numbers. This happened between 2017 and in 2018. These are the number of sexual abuse complaints that have come in to Uber. And so there is an 84-page report that really speaks to all of this. And I'll share that with you so that in your leisure, you can go to this link, take a look at it. And within this link, there is another hyperlink that will send you to the report. I think it says it's an 84-page report that talks about the sexual abuse complaints that have come in. So yeah, lady beware, pay attention, be careful. It says in this 84-page report that there were 235 reports of a rape in last year, 2018. 235 reports of rape in 2018, 280 reports of attempted rape. Who are they hiring or who are they allowing? What kind of background checks is Uber doing, or are they doing any checks at all? You had 235 successful rape complaints, and then you had 280 attempted rape complaints, and that was just last year. I don't know what the number was in 2017. They say that it's down a little bit from 2017 by 300, but but listen, one rape is one too many, right? And so I don't know why they can't get a handle on this. And I wonder what happens when these people are accused of either attempting rape or actually engaging in rape of drivers. Do they get to stay on and continue to drive? Do they ban them? Do they notify If you're an Uber driver, do they notify Lyft? If you have any, situation that is concerning, you certainly need to create that paper trail. You need to make sure that not only the police know, but you need to make sure that Uber knows. And then also 1,560 reports of groping. That means these drivers are grabbing folks in places they shouldn't be grabbing them. 1,560 reports of groping, and that was just last year. And they say the groping is actually up. So listen, I'm thinking, groping, that could only lead to one thing: an attempted rape and an ultimate rape, I would imagine. So again, be very mindful, be very careful. Share this information with your other friends, especially those of you who, Uber religiously. Now, maybe in this report, I didn't click on it to read, but I did share it in this thread, so you can do that. I don't know if there are areas that seem to be more prone to that kind of activity, or, are there times of day or night that are more problematic? I don't have the breakdown on the hows and the whys of it, but that's a lot. When you're calling someone and you're trusting them to get you from point A to point B safely, because either you don't have the transportation to do it yourself, or you, are a little bit impaired and you're doing the right thing and you're trying to be cautious and careful. So complacency, will get you hurt. Just know that. Now, on to, some salaciousness, if you will. Here on the LAPD, it's been reported that there was a police officer, and I don't know what the heck he was thinking, other than, cops tend to think that, because we arrest people, we're smarter than the folks we arrest. So this officer, unnamed, was caught on video, his body-worn camera, groping a deceased woman. It's not uncommon when someone passes away in their home for the police to be called. We do what's called a death investigation. And if it looks like it's just a natural, someone died of natural causes, then we complete a report and we, do what we can to comfort the family and, make a phone call or two to a mortuary, facilitate a coroner arriving if they need help with that, and then we're on our way. Now, I don't know what the hell, I don't know what this lady looked like. They're not naming her. I haven't seen a picture of her. They're not naming the officer either. I don't know what would make this officer want to touch this lady's breasts after she had passed away, but he did. And because he's a dum-dum, he thought he was being slick. So that lets me know that this is probably not the first time he's cut off his body-worn camera to commit misconduct. He just got caught. And maybe they know by now how many other times he may have committed police misconduct doing that very same thing, not realizing that even though he turns the camera off, there's a bit of a delay. And it was during that delay time, because he couldn't wait to start groping this deceased woman, that they caught it on video. And the way that they caught it is that I think did a routine audit. They just happened to be reviewing video. And I would imagine that, I did that as a sergeant, quality service audits. Sometimes I would go out and meet with people who my officers had visited for one reason or another on a radio call, or maybe somebody who got a traffic ticket or somebody who got arrested. I would just follow behind them and do a quality service check and just make sure that they appreciated the service that they received, right? So in reviewing this officer's body-worn camera, they saw him groping this lady. Now, he had a partner who was with him allegedly, and the partner left the room, went to the car for some reason, and it was during that time that this officer did that. And so now the cheese stands alone, because our union, the Police Protective League, that's the union for LAPD, they are not going to cover this officer. Normally, the Police Protective League might help an officer if he's charged with something criminally and has to go to court. This time, the president of the Los Angeles Police Protective League said that they're not going to, they can't support this. They can't defend it. So this time, this is one of the rare times when you see a union, air quote union, not backing an officer who's been accused of misconduct. So that's that. Now, over in Philadelphia, more sexual misconduct, this time committed by a chief inspector. This guy's name is Carl Holmes, and it sounds like he was busy. So I'm thinking that there are probably going to be more females that will be coming forward now, that at least 3 ladies have come forward and pressed charges against him. And, I'm sure that there are much more than just this 3. I saw some of my Philly family say this is probably just the tip of the iceberg. But nonetheless, his name is Carl Holmes. He is a chief inspector, and he has been arrested and charged with sexually assaulting 3 female officers. Now, this occurred between 2004 and 2007, and clearly, in my mind, this guy seems to be some kind of a predator. So here's how he did it. Because of his rank, chief inspector, young females joining the police department, looked up to him. He's a brother, and they, thought like I did when I would encounter someone who was of a higher rank than me when I was young on the job, and didn't really, oh, there's my G-pup. Don't mind him. Didn't really, know what was going on, or I had a question about something. And sometimes I got good advice, and then other times, because I was young and naive and didn't really know that I was dealing with a house Negro and not a field Negro. And they told me, oh, don't worry about that. Don't, just don't cut your nose to spite your face. Well, anyway, that kind of stuff happens. And some of you, who are on here listening to me may remember there was a young woman on LAPD, Lyons was her last name. And I'll just, I won't go into the gory details because I don't want to get sued, but it was alleged that there was a command staff officer who had raped her because she too, went to his house and, thought he was mentoring her, and something happened, and yeah. So, this is not unique to law enforcement, I'm sure. But anyway, these young ladies, looked up to this guy. He's a chief, what's his title? Chief inspector. And one young lady in particular had talked to him about another supervisor who was sexually harassing her. And she went to this guy, Carl Holmes, to confide in him. And, hey, what do I do? What's up? And he immediately starts sexually assaulting her, and then calls her the B word and says, look, ain't nobody gonna believe you because, I got rank and blah, 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 blah. Well, evidently it must have taken some time for these ladies to get the nerve, or maybe it was the numbers of them that gave them the nerve to finally come forward and actually speak on it and request some kind of criminal remedy. And so now there are 3 of them. And again, this happened between 2004 and 2007. So I understand, again, because I experienced that with a commanding officer who was sexually harassing me on the LAPD. And I get that, rank has its privileges, and depending on who you have your cart connected to, which horse, whose camp you're in, you might get the homie hookup, or you may be made an example of. If you're command staff and you're committing misconduct, it's very, very difficult for subordinates to make a complaint against a high-ranking official on a police department, and then couple that with the fact that you're a female and you're a minority. Yeah, because retaliation is a real thing. So, I get it. I get why they didn't come forward sooner, because people always say, oh, why didn't they come forward sooner? And that makes me really mad, because I've been a victim of that. And I understand why you won't. And I feel some kind of way when people automatically assume that somehow the women are lying or making it up, because it happened between 2004 and 2007, and we're just now hearing about it. But there must be some legitimacy to it. It took Internal Affairs 3 years to investigate this. And I take that back. Take that back. It didn't take them 3 years. The female who complained, one of the females who complained about this Carl Holmes, when he then assaulted her, what they did, what the department did to her. Now, I don't know if it was him or if it was his, boys, but what they did to this female is they allegedly found some drugs in a trash can outside her home, abandoned, and they said that it was hers. And then she was investigated for nearly 3 years. So you could imagine the stress of having an internal affairs investigation hanging over your head, having been accused of being involved in some kind of drug activity or hanging out with guys, girls who are drug dealers, being an associate as a police officer. She went through this for 3 years after she complained about being sexually harassed by a command staff officer. And then that allegation that she was being looked at for, it was later unfounded. So, but for 3 years, I'm sure she went through hell. So again, why people, men, women don't complain about high-ranking officials on the police department. So now this guy is facing these charges for these 3 women, and he's not the only one on the Philadelphia Police Department who's got issues. So maybe that's just how they get down in Philly, because listen, a couple of months before this guy was charged, the police commissioner, his name is Richard Ross. He too had to step down amidst allegations of sexual harassment, gender and racial discrimination. He just said, you know what, I'm out of here. So yeah, that's a lot going on Philadelphia. Now, this guy Holmes, he has already been charged. It went to a grand jury and they concurred that there was sufficient evidence. He's been charged with aggravated indecent assault, attempted involuntary deviant sexual intercourse. He's a deviant on top of that? What the heck? And then other sex offenses. So listen, he was busy. Clearly he was busy. And because of the charges and the seriousness of these charges, the police union over there in Philadelphia, also the Fraternal Order of Police Lodge number 5, did a punctious pilot on Chief Inspector Carl Holmes. So he's gonna have to figure this one out on his own. It's nice to see that some of these police unions, if you will, are kind of, not in lockstep with officers who are engaged in misconduct. Now, I haven't seen that happen when the misconduct involves use of force or deadly use of force. I don't know if they're coming around or if they're just doing it because, these are sex-related offenses and it's an easy, I can't stand with you on this. I'm not really sure. I can't get in their head, clearly. But there's at least 2 instances that I'm reporting on this week. LAPD police union not supporting the officer, not defending the officer who was groping a deceased woman. And now this chief inspector who was engaged in sexual misconduct, allegedly, with 3 of his female subordinates. Police union, Fraternal Order of Police are not supporting him. Over in Baltimore, Marilyn Mosby, yeah, she's not playing. She's really been on one. And so it's just been reported that 25 Baltimore corrections officers have been indicted for allegedly leading a criminal enterprise and using excessive force. And, when I saw this story about what's going on over there in Baltimore, I also just kind of was Googling corrections officers, just kind of in general. And this seems to be a thing with these correctional officers. They are involved not only on the Baltimore Central Regional Tactical Unit, which is where these guys were working, but officers, correction officers from various departments across the nation seem to be involved in a lot of shenanigans. And listen, it's never a problem until it's a problem, right? And so you understand, if people aren't watching, folks realize how far they can push buttons and how far over the line they can go. And I think that's a lot of what happened with the whole Jeffrey Epstein thing, because I was talking to some folks about that and, just kind of giving my opinion on that, because I really don't think Jeffrey Epstein killed himself. I think that they were just negligent. I think that those correction officers probably routinely on Graveyard were on the internet. They probably routinely didn't go and check on folks like they were supposed to. They falsified their logs. And I don't think that they were making an example of the 2 that are facing charges behind Jeffrey Epstein's death. I think that they just realized the system was lax and nobody was watching and they took advantage. And that seems to be going on in more places than just 1 or 2. So over here in Baltimore, there were 25 officers who were assigned to this regional tactical unit, and they are charged with 236 counts, all 25, I guess, together. The 236 counts in Baltimore include conspiracy to promote and maintain a criminal organization by unlawful means. In other words, they're operating a criminal enterprise. They were participating in a conspiracy to participate in a criminal gang. So they're calling this tactical unit a criminal gang, and some of them have been charged with first and second degree assault, conspiracy to commit misconduct in office, and other related charges. Some of these assaults are described as violent assaults. They tampered with and destroyed evidence, and then they also falsified official public documents to maintain dominance and then shield its members of that unit from law enforcement. So I'll share this link with you as well, because again, I'm certain in this article, they will name names. And since there are 25 officers involved, again, you need to know the names of these people that are involved in case you've come across them in the not so distant past. And you may need to contact Marilyn Mosby and say, hey, you know, this officer did something untoward when he stopped me, he or she, because it doesn't necessarily have to be just guys that are, you know, engaged in misconduct. Typically, it's mostly guys, but, you know, every now and then we'll see a female lose her mind. So wanted to share that with you. Now, let me just talk a little bit about this thing with, hey, Marie, let me just talk about, hey, Daryl, AG Barr. I don't know if you guys heard this, but Attorney General William Barr, you know, Fred Flintstone, I call him, he made a comment the other day, and he said, listen, he was speaking somewhere, and he said that Americans who protest police officers, yeah, they should probably stop. They should probably stop. So, you know, it sounds like he's talking about, you know, Black Lives Matter folks and other people who protest police brutality. And here's what Barr said: if communities don't give that support and respect that officers deserve, then they might find themselves without the police protection they need. So I'm listening to that, and I just hear a whole lot of code talk in there, y'all. I'm hearing, you know, communities that don't give support and respect. Who determines whether or not a community supports and respects police officers? First of all, it's offensive that Barr would say this. Let's start with that. It's offensive that he would say this, and I don't even think this is anything. I mean, he's talking a whole lot of shit, if I could just say it like that. But I don't even see how he could really even make this thing come to fruition. So maybe communities, and he didn't say which communities, folks have been asking him to please explain, and he's not. But communities may not get the police protection that they need. So now police departments are going to start selectively providing service, like they selectively enforce laws. We know what happens when there's selective police enforcement, right? We know what happens when officers find a reason to engage certain communities. And so now he's saying, it sounds like, you know, code talk to certain police chiefs, commissioners, sheriffs. Hey, tell your officers, if you're not getting respect and support from those communities, then maybe you shouldn't provide them with certain services. So I say all that to say this, family. Here's what you need to do. And I do this all the time anyway. Whenever I deal with someone, and grown folks, you know, my contemporaries, I'm not talking to you because I think you guys already know. I'm really talking to the younger people who are listening. You should always, always, always get a name of whoever it is you deal with. And so now I guess we need to be mindful, because Barr is telling us, you need to be mindful, you know, when you do call for police services, the name of the person that you speak to, ask. I do it all the time, no matter what I'm calling for. I always ask, you know, excuse me, what's your name? So I could write it down so I know who I spoke to. So if something goes sideways, I can say, well, this is who I spoke to on this date, and this is what they said they were going to do, and they didn't. Or this is what I advised them of. And so someone knew about whatever my problem is. I always get a name, and I always make a note of it. So I guess going forward, if you call for police services, now granted, you may get a dispatcher, and everybody has identification numbers, whether you're a police officer or a dispatcher, then you need to know, excuse me, what's your serial number? What's your ID number? Because if the police don't show up and you have a legitimate response request, you need to know Is this that thing Barr was talking about? Is that why y'all didn't come? Because I'm in one of those air quote communities. And I found this kind of interesting because a couple of days before Barr said this, I read an article. NYPD has a new police commissioner. His name is Dermot Shea. And I talked about this on my podcast as well. They have a new police commissioner. And when he was speaking to the troops, one of the things that this new police commissioner on the NYPD said is he's going to make doggone sure that his officers get the respect that they deserve. He's going to demand that communities in New York respect his officers. So this is the second time in a couple of days that I've heard a high-level official talk about making sure communities respect police officers. And if you don't, then there's a price to pay, is what it sounds like to me. So I'm wondering, did they have a meeting about this? Did they talk about this stuff? And, and they so bold and gangster with it that they just said, you know what, we just gonna say this out in the open. And you guys make of it what you may. So have they been having conversations? Attorney General William Barr, has he already given the memo to police chiefs, sheriffs, and commissioners across the nation? I just find it very telling that they would both say pretty much the same thing, same talking point, within a few days of one another. So again, if you have a need for police services, and you don't have to be all, extra with it, just, I'm sorry, what was your name? So that in the event police don't respond, and if you have to start keeping a chronological log of how many times you called for service and how many times they didn't respond because somebody else is going to need to know down the road, then, create that paper trail, have a log. It's sad that we're getting to this. But anyway, having said all that, I shared also on my Facebook page a letter that was written by the National Black Police Officers Association. And the female captain who heads that organization wrote a letter in response to what William Barr had to say. And so I reached out to my sister, and I'm assuming that she will see this at some point and we'll have a chance to talk about it, Sonia. Because what I want to know is, what is NBPA going to do for community members across the nation? NBPA is a national organization, National Black Police Officers Association. And so under them are other little mini police officer associations, AKA unions, if you will, Black Police Officers Associations across the nation. So since the NBPA is aware of this, I wanted to know, and I hope to have a conversation with my sister in law enforcement about what it is they will do for folks who may have a concern. Will they be a resource for communities who feel like police are not responding because somehow they're butthurt and they think that these are communities who are not giving them the respect that they are owed? How do you determine that? I don't know. It's very problematic, but I want to see what the NBPA is going to do or offer as a resource to communities. And so once I find that out, I will come back and share that with you. I understand from my sister in law enforcement that there are some discussions and things that they're looking at and talking about on a national level, because this could be a big deal. Also, I want to talk a little bit about this, and so I may ruffle some feathers, but I saw a lot of chatter on Facebook about this. And there was a police officer, I talked about it on my podcast, in Detroit, who was shot and killed about a week or so ago. And in all of that, I guess there was a supervisor who was supposed to respond to this call of a home invasion in progress, and the supervisor didn't show up. The supervisor stayed down the street and kind of watched from a distance. And ultimately, there was an officer-involved shooting because the suspect who was involved in this home invasion in progress hid in a basement with a rifle. And when the officers descended the stairs, they shot this officer fatally and wounded another. So the police chief over there in Detroit, James Craig, retired LAPD captain, police chief on another department or two before he wound up in Detroit, which is where he's from, was really bothered by this whole failure, if you will, of the supervisor to respond. And in doing this press conference, James Craig talked about this supervisor had been a police officer previously and had been either fired or was recommended that he be fired, and instead he was given a 65-day suspension for allegedly cowardice. He was with a female partner who was getting her ass handed to her. She was being beaten up, assaulted by somebody, and he just watched this supervisor. His last name is Kidd. And so he should have been fired, according to James Craig. He wasn't fired. And then 2 years later, there was an opportunity for him to take a promotional test. He did. And because there had been sufficient enough time between him not helping his partner who was being assaulted and the promotional test, he took it, he passed, and they made him a sergeant. And so fast forward to last week, officers requested a sergeant. He didn't show up, and officer was killed in the line of duty. So the problem that I have with all this is that, you know, my old partner, James Craig, said that he was looking at, I guess, the 65-day suspension that was given to this then officer, now sergeant. James Craig said he never, ever would have agreed to a 65-day suspension because the misconduct in his mind was so egregious the officer should have been terminated. And that somehow now on this paperwork for the 65-day suspension bears James Craig's signature, but his signature is in a purple ink. Now, James Craig, Detroit police chief, says, I never use purple ink. I only use green for official business. And I just thought that was kind of cute because, you know, when I was on LAPD and Bernard Parks was the police chief, I believe his color of preference was brown. So he signed everything with brown ink, a brown marker, like kind of like little Tink Tink, you know, has the black Sharpie. Well, Bernard had a brown marker. And so James Craig says he only uses green. And this 65-day suspension had his name on it in purple. And now James Craig is going to do an investigation to see how that happened. So here's what I want to know, James. And I said this, you know, on my podcast. I'm going to say it again here, sir. Is why did you wait until now to decide to investigate this forgery of your name from 2014? Because clearly I'm thinking in 5 years, certainly you should have been able to get to the bottom of who put your name on that 65-day suspension that you said you never would have agreed to. This officer should have been fired back in 2014, yet he stayed on the job until last week and acted in a way that caused another one of your officers to lose their life, not get beat up, not get assaulted, but to actually lose their life in the line of duty. And so I'm just saying, James, you know, that just sounds like, you know, I don't know. I got questions. And I just mentioned this because, you know, I saw some chatter on Facebook and it was really funny. And listen, I'm gonna just say this, I'm gonna call a thing, because folks were talking about it. And I've talked to some folks, you know, who were on the department, who know me, know him, know the situation. Some of them were supervisors as well, varying ranks. And, you know, we all got questions. Now, they're not gonna ask you, James, you know, because I don't know why, but I'm asking, sir, what's up with that? Why did you wait 5 years, James? And it just doesn't seem like a sensible thing to do. And, you know, everybody on Facebook was telling him what a great leader he is and how proud of him they are. And, you know, it was like a scene from Pulp Fiction, you know, when Harvey Keitel, the wolf, you know, had told Samuel Jackson and John Travolta, you know, before they start, you know, doing that circle jerk thing and waiting for happy endings, before we start doing that, can we just, you know, focus? It would have been nice if they would have done some focusing over there on that page where everybody was on James's tip telling him how amazing he is. And I'm not saying you're not amazing, James. You know, I'm not saying you're not amazing. I'm just saying I call bullshit. That's all. Somebody forged your signature 5 years ago. You let this officer stay on the job for 5 years, let him promote to sergeant. And listen, I know there's processes and protocols and due process, but if your name was forged on a 65-day suspension, James Craig, how did you let that stand for 5 years? And, you know, listen, I'm going to just say this too, sir, while we talking, because folks was wondering, you know, when was the last time have you ever seen a police chief go on TV and complain about something, you know, a sergeant did because officers told him, hey, chief, that's messed up what the sergeant did, and he needs to be fired right now. And so I'm just saying, you know, I was a supervisor too, James, right? And so I'm just saying that maybe some of that stuff that was said during that press conference might be helpful to keep this guy on the job if he has a real good attorney, because, you know, since we know due process is a thing, and you said you sent him home immediately, or you demoted him or whatever it was you did, James, immediately, it almost sounds like you kind of rushed to judgment and you kind of already decided. And was he really acting in a cowardly way? Or, you know, did you talk to him? Did you talk to others? I don't know. I wasn't there, James. I'm just saying I got questions. And so I'm asking them because, you know, I know your fan club won't. I'm just saying, I'm calling a thing a thing. So so that's that. Now, let me take off my messy coat. Well, hold up, not just yet, because I got to talk about Eddie Johnson. I got to talk about Superintendent Eddie Johnson, because you guys, we talked about this, right? Remember when Eddie Johnson first, you know, got the homie hookup? I said it was a homie hookup. He fell asleep behind the wheel of the car, allegedly. He, you know, had a batch of bad greens, or, you know, greens and cabbage together. I don't know what it was, that and his hypertension medicine. And he said it made him sleepy because he had been out. And he decided to pull over, and then somebody saw him slumped over in the car and called the police, and the police came. Well, now we know. So the police showed up, and he flashed his little badge, and you know, once they woke his ass up, and he gave them that story about high blood pressure medicine and, you know, food not sitting on his stomach. So they let him go. And now those officers are under investigation because, listen, if they caught you behind the wheel of your car slumped over, would they just let you go without an FST or without taking you down and making you blow into a breathalyzer? Of course they wouldn't. And so once, you know, Superintendent Eddie Johnson got home, he could certainly say, oh, when I got home, I was so nervous. I just took 3 quick shots. And now I am drunk, but I wasn't drunk then. How can you prove it? You can't. But we know he probably was, right? And now the mayor is hot with him because now the mayor said, and again, this is just what I think. I think that it was probably about to come out. And so the mayor had to get ahead of it. Just what I think. I have no proof. But there's evidence. There's evidence that Eddie was out with a side piece. And listen, it wasn't just any side piece. It was his security. He had female security, allegedly, according to the report that I read. He had female security, and I don't know if this is how they got down all the time, right? So every time he had to go somewhere, he had to take security with him, right? His female security. And on this particular night, they were together. And it's reported that there was video of them, you know, in a booth in a corner in the back in the dark, doing what you would expect a superintendent to do with his female security, in the booth in the back in the corner in the dark. They got video. And so the mayor, you know, said that she, you know, put the IG on him, and they did an investigation, and they see him and this female member of his security detail. Video shows them kissing repeatedly, evidently, according to this. And that this female is married, but separated or in the process of a divorce from about a year ago. And of course, Eddie Johnson is married as well. So, you know, the mayor came out last week and she said that she was going to fire him immediately. She said she was going to fire him on Monday. because he had said things to her that were blatantly false about that whole situation, and she just could not let it stand. But she said, in great deference to his wife, she wasn't going to get into the details. And so, you know, my ears started perking when she said, in great deference to his wife. I knew it involved a side piece, because why else would you be concerned about what his wife is thinking, feeling, or knowing about this whole situation? So sure enough, now it's been reported, you know, female member of a security detail was with him. They had been out drinking for hours before that whole thing with his stomach happened, and he had to pull over to the side of the road in his city issued vehicle. So the mayor said, you know what, dude, you got to go, not now, but right now. And remember, before that even happened, before Monday, there was a big press conference at LAPD. Retired Chief Charlie Beck was there, standing next to the mayor and to the commissioner, the superintendent, Eddie Johnson. And she was naming him as the interim, or she said she was courting him to be the interim. And listen, you guys know, like I know, think about it. Anytime a high level official is leaving, they always extend the courtesy of notification if they're going to retire, so that the agency has plenty of time to go out and do a search for a candidate that would be a suitable replacement. Why would Charlie Beck be standing next to Eddie Johnson being named as the interim when Eddie Johnson is still there? Did the mayor know that this mess was going on back then? I'm just asking. I don't know. I'm just saying. I got questions. So if she knew back then when she made Charlie the interim, she gave Eddie Johnson till the end of the month, December, to retire, right? They had a big dog and pony show, 30,000 years on the job, amazing, you know, a lot of ass kissing, a lot of, right? And now she's mad because, you know, this is making her look kind of bad. So now she says, Monday, dude, you got to go. Not now, but right now. So she made him go. She fired him. She fired him. She said the words, I'm firing him. And when she did that, what ultimately happened is that he was basically demoted, according to the report that I read. He was demoted from superintendent to a lieutenant. He went from a superintendent to a lieutenant on Monday. Now, you know, it takes a little while for you to start pulling levers and pushing buttons to really get rid of a law enforcement officer, even command staff. You can't just make it happen with the wave of your wand. And so Eddie Johnson said, you know what? FOH. I retire. So he retired either today or yesterday. He retired. So he retired before she could fire him. And so for those of you who were asking subbies, he does get to keep his pension because, you know, he worked and he earned it and you can't take it away from him. So he gets to get his pension, but he gets his pension as a lieutenant. That's kind of the bummer part. He don't get that superintendent pension because she had already broke him down. And truthfully, the way the article works, and I know that different departments are, you know, different. Certainly Chicago seems to be much different from LA. But when she removed him as superintendent, that put him down to his next rank, which is lieutenant. And because he's a lieutenant, the only way he could have really truly been fired is he would have to be subject and sent to some kind of an administrative hearing. A board would have to fire him, which kind of sounds like on LAPD, our Board of Rights. Now, Board of Rights on LAPD doesn't fire you, but they make the recommendation to the police chief, right? And the police chief ultimately decides on discipline. But because this stuff happened so quick, and because the mayor was really personally involved in this, why? Because I think this was going to make her look bad. And so she had to do something. So they hadn't even filed any kind of administrative paperwork. They hadn't charged him administratively. So it was going to take some time to get those mechanisms working. And before they could do all of that, Eddie just said, I don't have nothing to prove to you or you or you. But he does have some splaining to do to Mrs. Eddie Johnson, no doubt, right? So he retired, and he gets to do that along with his pension. And he said, whatever y'all think is what y'all think. I don't really care. But I knew when I heard the story that there was much more to it, Mitchell, just like you. Because listen, I'm going to say to the mayor what they say to us. You know, if you didn't know, you should have known. It was also reported that, when he finally got his fat ass home, oh, I'm sorry, when he finally got home, I don't know what his ass looks like. I should not have said that. Forgive me. When he finally got home, he got a phone call from the mayor, and the mayor asked him, hey, what's up? What happened? You okay? Says she. I don't believe that for a minute, because listen, I'm here in LA and I'm just a little old sergeant. And I knew he had been drinking, and I figured he probably wasn't alone drinking either, right? The mayor didn't know that? Come on now, mayor. You didn't know when you called him up on the phone and had that conversation with him that it was possible that he could have been drinking? You didn't know about that female member on his security team, that they seem to spend a lot of time in, late night surveillance, stakeouts. I don't know what the heck they're doing. But you didn't know, Mayor? Come on now. If you didn't know, you should have. That's what you guys like to tell little police officers when they get in trouble. If you didn't know, you should have known. So before this thing got public, because again, there's video of him and old girl kissing and whatever else they were doing. It was going to come out. It was just a matter of time. Somebody was going to leak it. So I think the mayor is really trying to save face, and I think that's why she was so butthurt. That's just me. And why she seems so personally invested in that whole situation. That's just me. Okay, Vernon, you want to know, do I have any info on Charlie Beck? Oh, because you're there in Chicago. Oh, dude, there's lots of stuff out there about Charlie Beck. If you want to know, Google him. Come on now. There's information out there on Charlie Beck. Yeah, I mean, he's no different than any of the others. I'll just say that. He's there was a whole lot of nepotism accusations going on here on the LAPD, and Charlie Beck ain't no different, allegedly, than any other man. It's certainly been alleged. I don't know nothing about this, that there was a time or two when he too would use his ink pen in the company inkwell, if you will. Allegedly. So yeah, rank has its privileges. In terms of what kind of, he's a long time police officer. Every police chief was a police officer. He grew up on the LAPD, and he knows foolishness when he sees it. How he's going to conduct and comport himself when he gets there in Chicago, I don't know. I don't know if he's going to bring a team with him from LA who he can trust, because a lot of times police chiefs do better when they have people that they can bring with them, who they trust, even though the system is different. But I don't know how he will be. But listen, don't expect him to be caring about what you care about. I can just tell you that. I hope that helps, Vernon. But if you really want to know, Google Charlie Beck and LAPD, and you'll see the kind of shenanigans that was going on when he was here on the LAPD. I will tell you one thing that I know about that's public, and I've talked about this before. There was a white officer. His last name is Hillman, Sean Hillman, I believe, and he was I think he's a family member, maybe the son of another high-ranking LAPD official. And this Hillman kid was out in the Inland Empire area, in about an hour and a half east of Los Angeles, at a honky-tonk bar. Okay. And he got into an argument with a brother who probably had no business being in the damn honky-tonk bar. The N-word was used, allegedly. Sheriff's Department responded, and all of this was on video, the way it's reported. And this officer was investigated for using the N-word against this Negro in the honky-tonk bar. And he ultimately was sent to an administrative hearing on the LAPD, a board of rights. He was found guilty of giving false statements because he said he didn't use the N word, but it was caught on the recording, the way I heard the story reported, by the sheriffs. So there was evidence and proof of him calling this guy the N word. He said he didn't. False and misleading. Typically, when you're found guilty of false and misleading, you've heard me talk about this, you're ineffective, like Pantaleo. When you're caught lying, you can't be a police officer. Well, because this kid, Hillman, was the family member of an LAPD high-ranking command staff officer, also with the same last name, Hillman, he got the homie hookup. He got a 65-day suspension. Charlie Beck came out and said this was serious misconduct, and that's why I gave him a 65-day suspension. Well, I believe he gave him a 65-day suspension because he gave him a homie hookup, because this kid was relative of a, Charlie's homeboy. And with the 65-day suspension, he gets to keep his job. And he, I heard, don't know this to be true because I'm not there, but I heard he was working in the jail. So he can't be around the public, but he gets to stay on, he gets to earn a salary, and he gets to continue to work on a pension. That's Charlie Beck. Vernon, just so you know. Now, over in New York, I don't know if many of you remember the name Louima, the Haitian immigrant who was viciously, savagely assaulted. I think this was back in 1997. Well, the officer who assaulted Louima, his name is Charles Schwartz. And evidently, Charles Schwartz was one of 4 officers who had taken Louima into the back bathroom at one of the precincts, and they sodomized him with a broom. Well, the officer who actually did that, his name is Justin Volpe. He was, he pled guilty and was sentenced to 30 years in prison. Well, for his role, Charles Schwartz was sent to a federal prison. He went to trial a couple of different times, and in the midst of all of that, somehow he wound up being found only guilty of perjury, lying about whatever it was that happened. And he did 5 years in federal prison for that. Well, now, fast forward, Charles Schwartz, 54 years old, he's out of prison, and he really just got a cool ass job working for something called, and I don't know what this actually means in New York, but those of you who live there may know, he is a carpenter now for the NYCHA. I don't know what NYCHA means, but he's a carpenter, and this is a city job. So they're talking about it because, he had a city job where he really did something outrageous and egregious, and now he's back on the city payroll. And as a carpenter for the NYCHA, he makes reported $365 every day. That's $114,000 he made last year, and that includes overtime, the way it's reported. So, a lot of people are bothered by that he could, get out of jail and get such a cushy job as NYCHA carpenter. So, I would just be concerned, and I don't know how you guys feel over there. He's working in Brooklyn somewhere, so he'll be coming in and out of your units, and I don't know how comfortable you feel having him in and out of your units doing whatever kind of carpentry work he's doing. But, when you have the pale privilege, you get to be involved in that kind of activity as a police officer, go to prison, get out, and get a job where you make 6 figures. I mean, I'm not hating, but sheesh. So that's it, family. Thank you for joining me. I'm glad to be back. We'll do this again, every week through the end of the year. And I will, unless something earth-shattering happens, I'll see you next Thursday. For those of you, again, who are new to my Facebook Live, Visit my website, www.sgtshirldorsey.com, for more about me, more about my life on the Los Angeles Police Department. Read my autobiography, Black and Blue, The Creation of a Social Advocate, where I talk about my 20-year career. I talk about real life events that I was involved in. I name names. And I also talk at great length about the advocacy work that I've been doing since I wrote my book initially in 2013, not knowing that everything that happened in 2014 going forward with Mike Brown and Ezell Ford and Eric Garner and Tamir Rice and Sam DuBose and Sandra Bland and Floyd Dent and every other name that I could rattle off. Charles Kinsey. You guys know what's up. Didn't know that any of that stuff was going to happen when I wrote my book. I really just wanted people to know from a perspective of a Black person who had been on the inside, what it looks like, what it feels like, what it smells like. And then having had those experiences, I realized after 2014 that I really needed to share with you in a real, honest, candid way what it is that I think might help you survive a police encounter should you run across a Ray Tenzing, a Brian Encinia, Darren Wilson, Timothy Loman. You know the names. I wanted to tell you what I think might keep you safe. And then when you do survive that police encounter, I want you to understand why it's so important to comply and complain, create a paper trail, show a pattern of practice for those errant officers so that when they do something that makes national news, no one can ever pretend like this is the first time they've ever heard of it. So that's who I am. That's what I do. And we'll see you again on next Thursday. Until then, be good and be safe.